Hello, everyone. Welcome. Come on in. Thank you for being here. Thank you for watching the replay if you're not here with us live. I'm so excited for this training today. Let me just adjust my screen a little bit so we're not. There we go. That's a little better. Anyway, I'm so excited for today's training because this is one that I put two options in our group and had people vote on. And while both options got votes, I felt this one was a little bit more timely. So this month, we're going to be talking about building reading stamina, especially after a long break like spring break or after state testing, those kinds of things. And then in May, we will do the other option, which was talking about student reflection. So that's a great way to kind of end the year. I think we'll have a training this month and then we'll have a training in May. And then I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do over this summer. I think June and July will look a little bit different, and then we'll pick up with monthly trainings again in August. I will still do weekly check-ins, probably just to let you know what's going on in the group. The group's going to be growing over this summer with different things that I want to include in the group. So I'll keep you updated with those on Monday. If you can't join us live, of course, the replays are always in the group. So I'm excited that you're here. And I'm excited for those of you even watching on the replay. So if you are watching on the replay, if you could just, type a little hello in the chat, let me know that you were here. I would greatly appreciate it. All right. I know if you were here on Monday on our weekly check-in, I said I wasn't going to do slides. But what I'm finding as I'm doing these weekly check-ins is that if I don't have something prepared, I kind of ramble. So this morning I did put together some slides for us. So I'm going to share my screen with those slides. I'm going to try really hard to keep it to our 30 minutes because I think that that is important to honor your time and to the commitment so that you can be here live. Know that you, I think this is right. Let me just double check, make sure. I feel like this is correct, but let me double check something because I have done this before and then realized that I was not actually sharing anything. It does look like we are set to go. Okay, if you can't see something, go ahead and let me know that as well. But I think that we are good to go. All right, so here is just our quick little slide. We're going to talk about reading stamina. And this is about rebuilding after an extended break. Pardon me. And so before we get started with, I have 5 strategies to present for you today. And as we start, I want to talk about independent reading and kind of where I stand with independent reading and why I think it's important and those kinds of things. So independent reading is something that I'm very passionate about. I've been passionate about it my whole entire career. It's looked different, it's taken on many different forms throughout the 30 years that I've been in the classroom, but it's something I feel is very important. Because my job as an English teacher or a language arts teacher is not just to get students through the curriculum, right? My job is to help students understand reading, understand the importance of reading, understand how we understand the world through reading, and how it brings curiosity and it brings ideas. And it's just a way for us to connect with other people that maybe we wouldn't normally ever have that opportunity. And so reading for me is something that goes well beyond just can they identify the elements of reading. And so I have always incorporated some form of independent reading in my classroom, whether that was silent reading within my classroom, whether that was assigned reading outside of classroom. Independent and choice reading has always been part of my curriculum. So with that said, I want to talk about reading stamina. And reading stamina, regardless of what your student's background is something you have to always think about starting from ground zero, whether we're starting at the beginning of the year or whether we're starting after winter break, whether we're starting after a 4-day weekend, whether we're starting after spring break or state testing or whatever that break is. We can't assume that students can just jump right back into it, especially after like a long summer break or a long winter break or spring break. A lot of our students don't choose to read for entertainment. And so they have spent a whole week of not doing something. So think of it this way. If you have exercise, if you have like, New Year's resolution, you're going to exercise. That first day, you may have run in your youth. You may have done exercise classes or gone to the gym. And then you took months off, year off, maybe even a couple years. You can't go to the gym that first day and expect to be able to perform the way you did when you were going consistently. Well, it's kind of the same thing. We have to reestablish our routines, reestablish our expectations, and have ease students back into it. Just like we ease ourselves pardon me, back into work after a long break. We have to ease our students back in to it. Not being easy on them, because I do believe that we need to push our students a little harder, but we need to also do it in a very intentional way. So these strategies will probably not be new for a lot of you, but they are good reminders about things that you can do. You can do these really any time of the school year, even if you haven't been on a break, but you just find that your students are lacking a little bit in stamina and you want to just reestablish it again. Any of these strategies are going to work. So I have 5 of them here for you. And we're going to start here with starting with short reading blocks. So this is very, very, very important. And it's going to vary depending on your students' level of ability to read, your students' love of reading. But I'm just going to talk in general. So you're going to always start with a short reading block. And what I mean by that is setting aside 8 to 10 minutes. At the very beginning of the school year, I actually start with 5. And if I can get everybody reading in that 5 minutes, then I'll start to add some time. There's one more thing I do want to preface as we're talking about this, because with reading stamina, a lot of times we are focused on those students that are not doing what we're asking them to do. And then in our minds, we can sometimes blow that up to think that, well, nobody's reading. So if you're in a situation where I say something like, start with 8 minutes, and you're like, my kids won't read for 8 minutes, I want you to really focus for a moment and think about who exactly is not reading. You have a class of 30. You have 22 of them that are reading and 8 of them that you're still working on getting to read. Don't sacrifice those 22 because those 8 are not reading. Still incorporate this and then work on those 8. And we'll talk about some things that you can do. But don't get so focused on the students who are not doing what you're asking them to do or not engaging in the reading. Start to focus on those who are. Don't sacrifice the students. So with that said, I'm going to go back to this. So we're going to start with short reading blocks. And so start with your 5. I wouldn't go lower than 5 because that's hardly time to get into a book or even to start a chapter. So start with 5 minutes. If your students are already like easily able to do 5 minutes, then move that up to 8 minutes, 10 minutes, but start with this small chunk of time where you have the most amount of students doing what you're asking them to do. And then as more students over time can build that stamina, then you can increase your time. So start small, keep it short. Let students know that every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, you're going to read. Every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, you're going to read. Whatever your routine for reading, it should be expected. Students should know when they come to your class on these days that you're going to read. In my class, I used it as my warm-up. And so my students knew that every day that they would need to have a book and that they would read. And I believe in being honest with you. There were years where that was the first 20 minutes of class we read every single day. In my class last year, that was the last year I was in an actual 8th grade classroom, we didn't get ever past 12 minutes the whole entire school year. And so we constantly were working to try and get to 12 minutes. But my students knew that they had to read, and I continually tried to push that. But I didn't sacrifice those 12 minutes for anything because it was super important for those that were doing what I asked them to do. So start small and then gradually build over time, and keep your reading routine consistent, meaning your students know what days to expect the reading. All right. Low risk accountability. So you'll hear me say it a couple of times in this presentation. I'm not talking about grades as your accountability. The accountability is holding students accountable for what they've read. And there's a couple of ways to do that. One is to have them do a quick write after they read. Have them reflect on what they've just read. That can be a reflection about how they can connect to what they've read. That can be a reflection about how they feel about the characters have done in the section that they just read. And you can also just do a summary if that's all that you feel like your students can do. But getting them to read and then do something with the reading helps them to think about what it is that they've read. And that's going to help academically, but it's also going to help them when they're at home reading on their own to help keep their mind from wandering to other things. Pardon me, I don't know what is going on today. All right. Another low risk accountability is just a simple turn and talk. And I don't mean, and we've talked about this in our weekly check-ins, but I don't mean a turn and talk where you just say, okay, turn in, talk, and tell your neighbor what you read today. That is too open-ended for many of our students. And so a lot of them will just turn and say, oh, I read chapter 3 today, or I read to page 2, and then they'll start talking about whatever it is that they want. But when I say engage with a turn and talk, I literally mean ask them a question. And there are general questions you can ask. Turn and talk and tell your neighbor what your character, or a decision that your character made today. Turn to your neighbor and tell them what you think the theme of your book is. Turn to your neighbor and tell them what you think is going to happen in the next chapter, in the next section. Give them something specific to talk about so that students aren't just having to figure it out for themselves. A lot of times that's why they talk about other things, is because we haven't really told them what to talk about. We know when we say turn and talk, we want them to be focused on a topic, but for some students, if they can get out of it, they will. So give them something specific to talk about. Keep them engaged. All right. Number 3 is fostering student engagement. So this is that like ownership piece, that building curiosity within the student piece of reading. Give me 1 second. Oh, pardon me. I'm so sorry about that. All right. Fostering student engagement. Choice reading is vital, you guys. And I know there's this whole philosophy out there right now that choice reading is not important. And I think where that comes from is that so many people and they're well-intentioned. So if this is you, there's no judgment. But so many people with choice reading thought that meant students just needed to pick a book they wanted to read, and then they would grow as readers. And that's not the case. I kind of tend to think of choice reading as the game. So we do all of the curriculum, we learn all the skills, and then we have to put them into practice. And so it's the game. So if you're in basketball, you go to all of your practices, you learn how to dribble and you learn how to do all those things and how to pass the ball and the free throw and all of the things, all of the skills that are involved in how to play basketball. That's what you learn in practice. So for us, that's where we're going to learn in our curriculum. And if you have a specific curriculum, like a canned curriculum, that's where you're going to learn with the short stories and the nonfiction articles. And you're going to teach them all different pieces of reading that they need to do. And you're going to teach them how to think about reading. Then when they do their choice reading book, that's where they put everything into practice. That's where we take all the skills from our practice days at basketball and we put it into the game. And we see how it works. And then we go back and we practice some more and we refine skills. So choice reading is really where the rubber meets the road and where students have the opportunity to put into practice all of the things that we want them to know. All of the things that they're going to be even tested on, they need to have opportunities to practice independently. And that's where choice reading comes in. And the beauty of choice reading is that students have ownership. Think of how many choices our students don't have. They don't have choice to come to school. They don't have choice in a lot of areas of their life because they're kids. And so if we can provide choices for students, or provide opportunities for students to make choices, there's going to be more ownership over the reading simply because they're reading what they want to read. So it says here that allowing students to select their reading materials fosters ownership and increases motivation, leading to a 30% boost in engagement levels. You're reading a book that you want. How many times have you read a book that you couldn't put down? Well, it wasn't because of anything other than my own intrinsic motivation. I wanted to read. I was my curiosity about that book. And that's what we're trying to build in students. So choice reading and building choices, even if all that you can do is say, we have a choice between these three things, and you want students to choose from these three books or articles or whatever, give them the choice whenever you can. I have tons of podcasts and articles on choice and bringing in choice. I even have guest speaker talking about building choices into your classroom. So you can go look at those if you're interested. But choice is really going to boost that excitement and that curiosity and that motivation to want to read. All right, we've talked about this one as well. Book tastings, book talks. Like, students who don't read don't know what's out there. So how are they going to know what's out there other than browsing the shelves? Well, do a book tasting. I make it a point, middle school, high school, doesn't matter what grade I'm teaching, I make it a point to include library days in my curriculum. In a library day, if I have a 15-minute class, we might go like the last 15 minutes of class. If I have a block class, we might, go somewhere in between it. But I don't spend the whole period in the library, but we spend a good chunk of time, 15 to 20 minutes. But before we go to the library, I want students to kind of have in mind something they might be looking for. So book talks. I do book talks regularly. So when I say regularly, I don't mean every day. That would be an ideal world, but that's just not the reality of the classroom. Book talks are a great filler if you have an assignment that takes a little bit less time than you're anticipating. Grab a book off your classroom library and book talk it. You can plan for book talks and say, I'm going to do these 3 books this week, and then find time within there. I know a lot of people who do like First Chapter Fridays and Teaser Tuesdays and all those kinds of things. Those are great. And if you can do them, I encourage you to do them. They don't have to be that structured or that complicated. It really can just be talking about a book that you're excited about, or even if you're not, because my students read books that I'm not excited about, but I will introduce them. The biggest thing I can talk about in this realm is scary books. I hate to be scared. I don't like it at all. I don't even like it when people jump out at you and frighten you. Like, that's not I don't like it. I like to be in control. I don't like that. However, some of my students do. Some of my students enjoy that. So I will still present those kinds of books. All right. Let's see. Oh, book tastings. Book tastings are another great thing to do before you go to the library. I like to do book tastings. There's a couple of ways, actually. One, depending on how much time I have, I might come to school in the morning and grab books out of my classroom library, and I might put 4 or 5 books on each of my table groups. And then as we're doing lessons and different things for that day, I'm having students look at the books. I'm having them look at the covers. I'm having them look at the authors. I'm having them read a page or 2. That might be our warm up for the day before we go to the library. Book tastings can also be done by genre, where you have different groupings of books at each table group: biographies, mysteries, graphic novels, realistic fiction, whatever it is that you are presenting that day. And then have students do kind of a gallery walk as that last 5 minutes before we go to the library, so they're looking. And students can use the books in my library, but I still want them thinking about what it is that they want to read, what looks interesting to them before we head to the library. So maybe book tastings and that kind of thing, maybe we could put that as one of our back to school type training. So maybe October, November, somewhere in there. I will make a note of that and I rewatch this. And then the last thing on this fostering student engagement may sound counterproductive. And if you have followed me at all and you have been on any of my podcasts talking about this topic, or even in some of our weekly chats, I think we really, really, really need to encourage and normalize not finishing a book. Now, I'm going to preface everything that I'm saying with I'm not talking about the student that comes to class, reads a chapter, puts it back, reads a chapter, puts it back, and is only reading because the teacher made him go get a book off the shelf. I'm talking about students, because that's a whole other issue, right? I'm talking about the students who start a book, they get, I don't know, a third of the way through the book, and you just see them struggling. They don't like the book. They're just struggling because they feel like they're supposed to finish it or they have to finish it. Like, normalize saying it's okay to put that book back and get a different book. And the way that I like to do that is I make it part of my conversation with students when I talk about my own reading. So going back to the scary books, I've read some scary books. I don't always finish those books. I skip through some of the pages in the chapters, and I'm honest about that with my students. If I have honestly picked out a book, I've spent some time and have tried the book, I've gotten maybe 50 pages in, and it's just not a book for me, it's okay to put it on the shelf and to get another book. And so I talk about that. I model that with my students. And so that they see that it's okay. I don't want my students to walk away thinking that every adult reader finishes every book, because that's just not the reality. I have books on my bookshelf over here that I have started multiple times and just can't get into them, and probably should be taken off the shelf and donated for somebody else to enjoy. But we should normalize that. All right, I am going to do my best to make sure we are on time today. So let me go to our last one here, and that is setting reading goals. Again, I'm going to bring our focus all the way down to the bottom where it says focus on participation, not a grade. So all of these things that I'm talking about on setting goals is not to have a grade in the grade book. So I know that we need to do things in our class to have grades. And I know for a really long time, reading logs were super popular, and that students would get an A if they read 200 pages and a B if they read 150 pages. And I participated that in myself. That was the thinking at the time, and that's what we did. But there's so much research out there that doesn't do anything but encourage students and parents to lie to you. So that's not what I'm talking about here. What I'm talking about is finding ways for students to see their progress. So students kind of get stuck in the I can't do it, or I don't know how to do it, or I'm not good at it. And we, as a society, not really found enough ways to help students see their learning progress. We put so much emphasis into like test scores, and that doesn't always show exactly what a student is learning, right? And so that's kind of where these are coming from. So I want you to practice this also, that you can do this with an individual, and you also do it as class goals. So one way that I like to set reading goals as a class, because I want it to be individualized. So I might say, because I worked in a district where we had trimesters, so I might ask the beginning of second trimester to third trimester, I would ask each student, how many books do you feel like you can finish? Because they know the routine, they know how much time they're going to have in class to read, they know if they read outside of class, they know themselves, all those things. But I ask each of them, how many books do you think you can read in the trimester? And they just put it on a sticky note, no names, nothing, and they turn it into me. It's one of our exit tickets at the beginning of the term. Then I add all of that up, and let's say that my classes, they can read 75 books. I'm just picking a number out of the top of my head. They can read 75 books this trimester. So then we make a goal, and I put it on a chart. We make a chart that our reading goal is 75 books. Okay? So each time a student finishes a book, they get to come to me. They say they finished their book. I give them just those little round dots, you know, the colored dot stickers. They get a sticker to put it up on the, it's just parchment paper. It's nothing special. They put it up on the parchment paper, and then they get to ring a little bell. And I don't have it on my desk right now, but it's just a little bell. They get to ring it like this, and they love it. It doesn't cost me anything. They're excited, and it's visual for the whole class. And then we kind of look at the end of the term. Did we meet our goal? Did we exceed our goal? If we didn't read our goal, we kind of talk about why, not in terms of who did and who didn't read, but just I read this book and it took me longer to read it. Oh, track is starting, and so I didn't have as much time at home to read. I was sick and I was absent, so I didn't get the in-class time to read, those kinds of things, just to help students pinpoint and identify different different goals and to see the successes and non-successes. And is that going to help 100% of your students? No. But remember, at the beginning of our training today, I talked about, focusing on the students who are doing what you're asking them to do. This is not a grade thing. We're just trying to continually move those students that are willing to move, moving them along. And then we're going to pull those other kids up, but it's going to look different for those kids that just aren't doing what we're asking them to do. All right. And all right. So looking at our slide here, establish clear goals. So for mine, we're going to say we're going to read 75 books a day. You could do it with individuals as well. Have your student pick their number, or if they are somebody who's going to read one book because that's they have some learning disabilities, they're a slow reader, they have attendance issues, whatever the case, that they might only get through one book in a trimester, then I would have them make a goal around a page number for themselves, not for a grade. Have them make a goal around a page number, or have them make a goal about time. And that's just an individual, and they could keep a track of that in a journal. They could keep track of it. There's tons of resources on Teachers Pay Teachers. You could probably even find some that are free on the internet where it's just like a little bookmark with books on it. They color in a book every time they've read for 10 minutes, or every time they've completed 20 pages, or whatever their goal is. That is a great visual to do with an individual student that helps them to track it. And because it's not tied to a grade, there's really no incentive for them to lie. They don't have to get a parent signature because it's just really between you and them. And it's a visual for them to see how well they're doing, or to track if they're doing what they say they're going to do. And it also encourages ownership. All right, what are some other things? All right, celebrating growth. Okay, so how can we celebrate growth? It's really tempting to celebrate growth extrinsically. And you could say that when my students ring the bell, that's an extrinsic thing. But I'm talking about, we don't want to bribe our kids with candy because they've read. We don't want to, bribe them with extra free time, those kinds of things. We really want to keep it something that they're excited about because they're excited, not because they're going to get this thing out here. And so, and you can, there's nothing wrong with giving students an extrinsic reward if they've met a goal. But the goal is to, over time, kind of wean them off of that a little bit. So finding ways to celebrate readings, celebrate those goals, even when you've done individual goals, just celebrating. You don't have to announce what somebody's goal was, but just celebrating that Clarice made her goal this week, and Sarah made her goal this week, and Stephen is working on his goal and almost made it, and that kind of thing. Those are great things to do the last 10, 15 minutes of that trimester or quarter or whatever your grading period is, or whatever your goal setting period was. Like, celebrate it and let students see that it's not an all or nothing. It's okay if we don't meet the goals. Going back to the 75 books, it's okay if we only made 68 books or 65 books, because then we can go back and be like, look at all this reading we did do. as opposed to, oh, well, we didn't get our goal, so we're not good enough, because that's never the message we want to send, right? All right. So I hope I've given you some things to think about today and some ideas. I just quickly go back through each of these. Again, reading some again, anytime after a break, start with short reading blocks. Get them reestablished with your routine again and build. You can build as quick or as slow as you need to for your students. Low risk accountability, find ways to connect reading to thinking. That's the big key right there, whether they're writing it or whether they're talking about it. Fostering student engagement, incorporating choice, and giving students opportunity to make choices by knowing what's out there. Structured discussion opportunities. Oh, did we talk about this one? I don't think we did. But this one, just really quickly before we go, because again, it's 3:30 right now, and I'm going to run over again. But structured discussion opportunities, this is just really finding ways to get your students talking about their books. So that can be like the quick turn and talks that we talked about. I like to do over here, incorporate task card questions and do like relays, because the relays with the task card questions, you can make it a game. I really enjoy doing that. And then students recommending books is also a great way to encourage students to be reading. And then set reading goals and celebrate growth. All right, everybody. I don't want to talk too much longer about this because I'm trying to keep it just to 30 minutes. This is why I have the slides, because otherwise I do tend to ramble. And I probably rambled a little bit here today. I will get better. This is only our third training, remember. But I'm so glad you're here. Thank you for attending. If you have questions or comments, remember, it's not just the way that I do things. So if you disagree with something I've said, feel free to pop that in the comments below. Let's get a conversation going about this and how we can continue helping our students build that reading stamina and see that reading is important for academics, but also just for life. All right, I will see everybody here on Monday, and have a great week, everybody. Bye-bye.